Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Content warning ahead. This podcast contains very sensitive topics such as missing persons, unsolved cases, haunted houses, and paranormal activity. These type of topics can contain very upsetting, sensitive details and stories. Please listen responsibly. Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a podcast in the business of ghostly spooks and chilling crime. I'm your host, Keely, and today we are kicking off a multi-part series for the spooky season, because this, of all times, is the best time for haunted locations and true crime ties. This 4-part series is inspired by the 28-day theory proposed by Ed and Lorraine Warren and the mini docuseries on Netflix based on this theory called 28 Day Haunted. Before I get further into the theory and the documentary, I do have an episode about the Warrens named The Life of Ed and Lorraine Warren, which came out in 2021 when Misty Mysteries only had about 20 episodes. And to put things in perspective, this is episode 112, I believe. In that episode, I covered the life of Ed and Lorraine Warren before they met each other, how they met each other, and how they got into the paranormal world to create the New England Society for Psychic Research. When I created this episode, there were definitely things I was scared to talk about as a new podcaster, and I just didn't have enough information to talk about it. So, I did briefly mention claims of fraud and inappropriate relationships with young girls in that episode. Throughout my podcast, especially in my 2-parter on the Perrin family haunting, also known as the Conjuring House, I have definitely shared both sides of the story, and often history or the side of the haunting have contradicted the Warrens' side and even the movies. I have talked about their relationship with the Catholic Church that makes them biased to those of other beliefs, but I have never talked about the relationship and the claims of that relationship. I will speak briefly on it because, honestly, podcasts like Innocent Till Tipsy, You're Wrong About, and That's Why We Drink have done extensive coverage on the controversies around Ed and Lorraine. But years ago, this was when Lorraine was still alive, but Ed had passed away, a woman named Judith Penny came out and said that when she was 15, she began a relationship with Ed, who was in his 30s. Judith shares that she lived in the Warrens' home and while there experienced sexual abuse and even forced into an abortion. When Judith shared this information with the public, Lorraine's PR team said she was too old to respond, but Tony and Judy Spira, Ed and Lorraine's son-in-law and daughter, did respond confirming that Judith did live in the Warrens' home, but there was never any inappropriate relationships between her and the Warrens. She lived there to care for the home and the books and artifacts while they were away traveling, as they often were doing. Information also came out that Lorraine had very specific terms to her contracts for the movies, including that the movies could not show the couple engaging in crime or engaging in extramarital affairs, especially ones with minors. I definitely have my own thoughts and opinions on this, but on Misty Mysteries, I try to keep my opinion out of it. I have shared both sides as best as I can, and I will try to have links in the episode descriptions where you can hear more about it and form your own opinions. But I will leave it by saying I support the victims. Now let's get into what we came here for, which is the 28-day theory.
Hey, I'm Gina.
And I'm Amber.
And we're here to bring you the Weird True Crime Podcast, where we cover true crime cases that will leave you asking yourself, did that really happen?
We'll dive into questionable cases throughout history that are solved, unsolved, or just plain unbelievable.
We'll also talk about the quirkier side of true crime in episodes we like to call What the F*** Wednesday.
So be sure to subscribe and listen on your favorite podcast service.
So, what is the 28-day theory? We know it's created by Ed and Lorraine Warren, but it seems to be created mostly by Lorraine's beliefs. Basically, it's that for a paranormal investigator or team to truly investigate a haunted location, they would need to stay 28 days at the location. During these 28 days, the paranormal investigators would need to go no contact with the outside world for the spirits at that location, especially a malevolent spirit, to truly pierce the veil. The Warrens have shared that these 28 days would not be an easy 28 days. Such an extended stay instead of the normal hours or days would agitate the spirits, especially malevolent ones, and they would start to try and push the investigators out of their space. By the last few days of the investigation, the veil would be basically non-existent, leaving the investigators very vulnerable. Ed and Lorraine passed before they could test this theory, but having 10,000 case files, if they did this type of investigation with each case, it would have taken them more than the average human life. This theory was created from what they called the 28-day cycle that they saw in many of their cases. Kind of like the Perrin family haunting, where day 1 activity starts, but by day 28 the family experiences the haunting in such a very isolating situation that would leave the veil between our world and the spiritual world very thin. And with malevolent spirits, this could leave those living in this situation vulnerable. If you haven't heard this theory before, or maybe you're like me and you heard it for the first time on this Netflix docuseries, that's because it really hasn't hit the paranormal community like some of the Warrens' other work. However, like the rest of their work, their son-in-law Tony Spira, who is now director of the NSPR and head curator of the Warrens Occult Museum, has continued to work on this theory. Alongside Aaron Sagers, an American journalist and paranormal expert, Tony created the 28-Day Haunted docuseries to help further this research. You can find this docuseries on Netflix. It follows the investigation of 3 different teams at 3 different locations that have been rarely investigated. Day 1, the 3 teams are driven to the location, not knowing where they would be going. In the car, they would hand over their phones to cut them off from communication with the outside world, since isolation is an important part of this theory. They also would have no idea they would test this theory by the Warrens. They were told they were there for 28 days to try to connect with the spirits. The first location and team you will meet is in Denver, Colorado, at the Lumber Baron Inn. This team consists of Shane Pittman and Ray Cozy. Shane has been a paranormal investigator at this time the documentary took place for 16 years. And the two had been investigating together for 10 years. Together, the two of them specialized in using sensory deprivation techniques to connect with spirits during their investigations. Joining them is a paranormal investigator and sensitive named Amy Parks. Amy has years of experience investigating and even helping police in criminal investigations. Amy considers herself more of an energy reader and shares she is more prone to spiritual attacks. All 3 have left behind their lives, jobs, and families to investigate the inn during this 28-day cycle. Right from the start, before entering the home, Amy feels a heavy male presence, and when entering the home, they all share that they feel heavy energy in the home. As they begin to explore the home and head upstairs, the lights begin to flicker, and footsteps are heard from down the hall in the room Amy will be staying in during this time, which is named the Valentine's Room. When they enter the room to investigate the sounds, Amy gets a feeling something bad took place in this room, seeing a woman with blood dripping down her face. This docuseries cuts back and forth between teams, so the next time we see the team at the inn is when they're ready to investigate on their first night. From the start of this night, they wanted to investigate Shane's room and Amy's room because this is where they felt the most energy and had the most interaction so far. To start their investigation, they are going to be using the Estes method of investigating. I've talked about this method before when discussing kindred spirits, but never knew the name till I watched this series. This is a method where one investigator wears noise-canceling headphones connected to a spirit box and wears something to blind them, such as a mask or a blindfold. This is basically immersing them into the spirit box session. Amy and Shane both did one of these sessions in their own room. During both of these, they connected to 2 women named Cara and Mary Ann, till an evil or dark spirit took over the spirit box, cursing them, telling them to get out, and making them ill. Based on responses that they got throughout the night, the team felt like Cara and Mary Ann are women who were killed in this inn. Now, what the team didn't know is that just based on the spirit box session on night 1, They had already found out a huge part of this location's history. The Lumber Baron Inn was built as a mansion for a Scottish immigrant, John Moult, his wife Amelia, and their 5 children in 1890. John was the owner of the Moult Lumber Company, the lumber company that had been credited to building 200 buildings in Denver, changing it from a small mining town to the city it has grown into today. Although John built the best home for himself, his mansion was 8,500 square feet. Every room had its own private bathroom and phone. Each room also featured a different type of wood, from oak to cherry to maple to sycamore. The fireplace mantel included carvings and tiny details. The dining room featured wood from each of these rooms to blend the place together, and the 3rd floor, where he hosted his lavish parties, was home to maple floors and a 20-foot pyramid ceiling. Eventually, in a tale as old as time, the children grew up, moving out of the family home and starting their own families in their own homes. John and Amelia moved to California, and the home began to change ownership and layouts, eventually becoming an apartment complex and becoming home to Cara Lee Notch, who had fallen into a rough time of her life until October 11, 1970, when Cara turned 17 years old. She was a junior in high school, and at her birthday dinner with her parents, shared some exciting news. The week of her birthday, she was going to be moving into a nicer studio apartment she had just found. Sadly, just days after her birthday, and only days before her move, on October 13, 1970, an unknown person had broken into her apartment at the inn. This person brutally attacked Cara and strangled her, taking her life. That night, sometime after 9 p.m., her friend, 18-year-old Mary Ann Weaver, dropped by the apartment to check in on Cara, only to be shot and killed by whoever had taken Cara's life. The women were found by an unknown male friend when he dropped by sometime after 2 a.m. on October 14th. The police were never able to make an arrest in the case, leaving their murder case open after all these years. By 1990, these apartments were home to many people living in poverty, and the buildings were neglected by the owners because, the landlord specials, and the building had been condemned. Very quickly, by 1991, it was bought by Walter and Julie Keller, who restored the home to its original layout, bringing back its historical status and turning it into the Lumber Baron Inn. Which brings us back to when our team of 3 are investigating the inn on the 28-day haunted docuseries. At this point, we know the history, but the team doesn't. They were set out to find out what this dark spirit they assumed was the killer of these women was hiding and what the women knew. In the theory, days 2 and 7 are the time of discovery for the investigation team, and that is exactly what was happening. Throughout this whole experience, the 3 of them relied heavily on the Estes method and other methods of sensory deprivation and meditation. Using the Estes method during this time, they were able to make a huge discovery when the women told the team to check the basement. In the basement, the team found a tunnel, or a little room, behind a locked door. This tunnel was creepy looking as the viewer and gave the investigators horrible feelings. As they went in to do the Estes session with Amy, they found a manhole cover. During Amy's session, after being told, "It's my house and get out," a shadow is seen walking outside the door of this odd tunnel, and a loud noise is heard from the manhole cover. The men pull Amy out of the Estes session and leave the tunnel, feeling unsafe and not knowing how strong this dark spirit may be just yet. The viewers are then cut to the next morning, where we see them sitting at the table and Shane is talking to them about these horrible dreams he had been having since staying at the inn. During his dream on night 2, he was hearing Fleetwood Mac playing loudly from Amy's room. In his dream, he walks over to Amy's room to see what was happening and sees a dress from underneath the bed. When he checks under the bed, he finds a contorted, dead woman laying under there. Telling the team this, knowing they kept getting interrupted by the dark spirits in the home, they made the decision to do a double Estes session with Ray and Shane. They began to get responses like the previous nights, hearing the women say their names and asking for help. The last thing they hear is, "He's hiding," before Shane's leg is pulled from under the bed and he jumps up, ending the Estes session. The next night, the team goes up to the 3rd floor where John had thrown his parties and now the inn hosts weddings. Here they experience hanging candles, swinging on their own in a closed-up room, only to walk out and find all cabinet and closet doors on the 3rd floor had opened on their own. As a viewer, we're shown the moment the camera caught all of the cabinet doors opening up on their own, and then we're cut to the halfway point during this 28-day cycle. At this halfway point, you'll see it happens in all of the locations, but they start to get frustrated with each other. This could just be because they're humans stuck together without contact to the outside world or anything else to do, acting as most humans would, or it could be the spirits trying to play with them like Tony and Aaron thought. Either way, at this point, Ray and Shane are upset with Amy because she won't do mirror scrying, and they felt like she wasn't pulling her weight in this project. After sitting down and talking, she explained she won't open herself up to evil or open portals using mirrors since they are believed to be portals. But she would be willing to do candle scrying to try to contact the spirits. She also brought up to Shane that he may have abilities he is too afraid to explore, and it then cuts to Amy that night doing candle scrying. While she is doing this, she is in her room by herself in a circle of candles. While she is doing this, trying to contact the spirits, the men start to see dark figures walking from Shane's room while sitting on the stairs. At the same time, Amy sees the shadow walking in the doorway and she starts having trouble breathing. Amy then starts to scream and drops to the floor because she felt something touch her back and her legs went numb. The men run up to help Amy and it cuts to the next day where Shane has decided after what happened to Amy he needed to step up and explore his own abilities. How was he going to do this? Shane decided to set up a sensory deprivation tank outside of the house using an inflatable pool, 18 pounds of salt, and 10 inches of water. Out of all of the paranormal shows I have seen, this was my first time seeing someone use something like this in an investigation, and it really made this whole investigation stand out to me. When Shane entered the sensory deprivation tank, we don't know how long he was actually in there, but while he was in there, he shared that he saw Marianne walking into the room where the killer took Kara's life. He saw her begging for her life, telling the killer she had a kid to get home to before he shot her, also taking her life. He said he saw the killer, but only identifies him as a man with a mustache. But he also saw this man killing other young women who he believed would still be missing. If you're going to watch the docuseries, I do want to tell you there are definitely things some of these investigators in every location discover that aren't fact, and it's why it won't be included in the history. For example, there is no proof or mention of Marianne having a child in any paper about the killing or her obituary, which normally in someone's obituary, their children would be mentioned. She could have had a kid. I saw online someone who claimed to be her daughter. She had it 16 years old, but there was nothing they shared that would make me feel secure, saying that that was for sure her child, and especially since it was in a Reddit forum about the murders. Now, the next day we see them is on day 23, and it's going to go really fast from here. On day 23, Shane was talking about his experience in the tank, telling Amy and Ray he believed the women's killer was a serial killer, and together they decided, since it was already so late in the investigation, and they kept getting blocked by this man, that the best option was to do a seance that night, to try and get the women without this man stepping in. During the seance, Shane got the message, "Look below and under, you're missing things in plain sight." Trying to decipher this, the team decided that even though they hated it as much as they did, they needed to head back to the tunnel in the basement, which cuts us to day 27, where the team conducts their last investigation. On this night, they headed to the basement with the message from the women in mind. They re-entered the tunnel and immediately a scream from a woman is heard from what sounds like one of the upper floors of the home, but they push on investigating the tunnel. In the tunnel, they find an old newspaper clipping in between some bricks for the murder of a 14-year-old girl in 1971 named Dolores Jane Martinez. I tried to look her up, but I could only find her find a grave, which confirms her death in 1971, but nothing about her murder. According to the newspaper article they found, she was found near a middle school not too far from the inn. The team started to think that this tunnel is where the killer could have hid or lived, especially after Ray went through the manhole cover in the tunnel, which led directly to the street, making it easy for someone to come and go. Believing that they found out what Kara and Marianne were trying to show them, they thanked the women for allowing them to be there and helping them find the secret. The last we see the team at the Lumber Baron Inn was day 29, when they packed up and left the inn, ending their 28-day cycle. Only knowing they were supposed to be connecting with the spirits, the team felt they did what they came to do and left feeling like better investigators, even believing this could change the world of paranormal investigation. As for Tony and Aaron, they believed by breaking through and solving this dark mystery, they had proven at the Lumber Baron Inn that the 28-day cycle, theorized by the Warrens, was true. That is the 28-day cycle at the Lumber Baron Inn and the theory of what the 28-day cycle is. This episode has definitely been a wild ride, so let me know what you think about this theory, the Warrens, and the investigation of the paranormal team. Don't forget to tune in next time to hear about the other locations and teams on this docuseries, and I will see you next time for more ghostly spooks and chilling crimes.